As I see some not familiar faces, a bit of context. So my name is Sascha Mielcarek, actually well pronounced. I'm the CEO of Canify. I joined Canify in March 23. And before that, I've been head of Europe for Tilray for 4.5 years. And before that, I've spent more than 20 years in the traditional pharmaceutical industry. So I'm stemming from regulated markets, and that's actually also the topic of Canify, because we strongly believe that Europe will remain a regulated medical market for the next 5 to 10 years to come. I don't see any really severe trend of changing that. So we run it as a regulated industry and as a regulated company. It's the big button, isn't it? It's the big one. Here we go. Thank you. As I've not been here yesterday, I hope that's not repetitive and boring for you. So I wanted to start a bit from the market and the market size. So you're looking at Europe. I'm aware there's more markets opening, but if you look at the addressable markets today, the ones painted in light or dark blue are the ones we are actually addressing. I know that Australia is not part of Europe, but it's a nice benchmark because compared to European markets, it's maybe a bit more advanced. And if you look, for example, on the right side on the per capita usage in Australia, you will see that the celebrated market these days, the German market, despite the fact that it's growing like hell, we are still very far away from prevalence and from sizes we see in other developed markets like Australia, like Israel, not even talking about Canada or like. Germany has been the most dynamic market in the last, I'd say, 24 months. But there's two interesting markets, not even online. And as Ludovic is from France, I think he can, or he has already shared, honestly, France from a traditional pharmaceutical perspective, looking at pain markets, looking at treatment pattern. Once it's regulated, it will become bigger than Germany, but right now it's not addressable for a company like Canify. And the same is true for Spain. So our focus point right now is Germany. And the reason you see basically in front of you, we always split it into two markets. The one is what we call the dried flower market, and the other one is extracts, also being aware that we see now more form factors like vapes and stuff, but those are the two original, let's say, sources of business. Germany remains a so-called compounding or magistral market, so for finished form factors, still very difficult to address. The upper quadrant shows you what happened with dried flower. So according to BfArM last year, we and other companies did import 201 tons of dried flower into Germany. Compared to the year before, there was 75 to 80 tons, and the year there before, it was 10 tons. So you see the dynamic. As I said, I work in regulated markets for 25 years. I've never worked in a market which is moving that fast. Looking at the lower end, that's the extracts. What you see here in terms of figures is only the reimbursed part of extracts because we have data on that. There is a private piece as well, but the extract market will not be bigger than 10% of the flower market, if at all. If you imagine that dynamic, you can imagine that the supply chains are pretty much under stress because if you look into the German market, there's not so many companies actually being able to import, process, pack, batch release product into the German market. I'd say it's 5 to 6 companies actually able to. There's other distributors who rather act as a wholesaler. So fully integrated companies, there's only a few. And to keep up with evolving regulations is quite a task. And that's why we call ourselves a one-stop shop, because we are trying to do it and we are trying to be a one-stop shop for German customers as well as on the supply end. A bit of segmentation around flower and extract. There's often talks about Germany being a reimbursed market. If you look at the flower segment, that's not true, right? Actually, I guesstimate 95% of the flower market today are out-of-pocket paid. You might have read that the German government is now so smart to take flower out of the reimbursement. That's actually a tiny movement, which us as companies will hardly actually feel. I think it's the wrong message, but still from a market perspective, it's not important because all this market is paid out of pocket and it's driven by patient and pharmacies, which is kind of unusual for a regulated medicinal market. The extract market instead is a reimbursed market in big parts and it's driven by physicians rather than by pharmacies and or patients. So in the extract segment, you often find patients who visited a doctor who is convinced of cannabis as a treatment, and they get a prescription. They don't get to the doctor necessarily informed about the strain they want, right? So it's a different pathway, which if you want to address that market, you have to act a bit different segment by segment. And that's why we call ourselves one-stop shop. Let's start from the left. So first thing we do a bit different than some others is our portfolio. We are pretty proud that it's very complete. Yes, our salaries are paid these days by the flower market, but we do stuff on top. We do full spectrum extracts as most of our competitors. We also do a purified extract. And we're the only company, despite Sativex as a regulated product, who has a sublingual spray, which is actually very differentiable from the other form factors in the market. In our own structure, talking about sales and marketing, we are one of the very few companies who actually has a pharmaceutical sales force. So we do go traditionally to doctors, knock their door, and try to convince them of prescriptions. That's very heavy lifting. That's very atypical for a flower company, but it helps us to position the more innovative form factors, which also tend to have higher margins. We do also have key account structures which address pharmacies for the direct business and the push business of the flower. But we run real sales rep as well who visit doctors and help extending cannabis as a treatment into the physician base, which unfortunately, if you look at the larger picture, is a bit the reason why we stay in that self-paying pocket, because actually us as companies, if you sum up all the sales forces, there might be 50 people talking about cannabis to doctors. The rest is addressing pharmacies. Nobody's actually talking to doctors and expanding the base of prescription. Well, we allow pharmacies to order from us as they wish. You might know that pharmacies in Germany is still a very traditional business, so it's actually the only professionals who still receive fax machines. So we still take orders by fax, which is kind of unusual. We do have also an online shop. We do have our people. So we receive orders on many levels. In terms of fulfillment, we work together with Germany's largest distributor called Phoenix. They are much more efficient in serving the single pharmacies. For us, it would be a heavy lifting to bring one jar of flour to a single pharmacy. So we cooperate with Phoenix, and they are able to fulfill our orders on the same day. Very recently, who has read the press, we in addition announced a joint venture, which we are very excited about. It's called Kataros. That's a joint venture with a company called Ihre Apotheken. Ihre Apotheken is actually the biggest online trading platform for pharmacies. It's an association of 7,500 pharmacies, which is basically half of all pharmacies in Germany. And they trade jointly on a platform prescription medicines and OTC medicines. We copied that platform into cannabis. We will be launching it in August and then have access to 7,500 pharmacies. If you look into the German market today, you will find dominating online pharmacies. So we are trying to spread the customer base to small pharmacies. And with our supply backbone, we help them to manage inventories. Because the biggest hurdle for a pharmacy to get online in Germany is to keep the inventory they will need for 1,000 cultivars. We do that for them, so a small pharmacy can start playing with cannabis by using our inventory. And in a compliant way, because we are not the only ones supplying through Kataros, we are inviting other suppliers and cultivators to use the platform as well. So it will not be a Canify-owned exclusive platform. Looking more onto the supply end, which is our other angle of the one-stop shop, so also towards getting supply and distributing it into the German market, we try, let's say, to cover all needs. If you look at the product, and I talked about the 200 tons, which suddenly increased into the German market, if you look where they're coming from, it's still mostly Canada. So 50% is rumored to be directly from Canada. Then there's 25% from Portugal, but most of the Portuguese material is actually stemming from Canada as well. So 75% of the current trade is actually Canadian product. Then there's some others. And there were supply chains built over time, especially for those companies who do not cultivate cannabis directly in GMP. They would need to convert it into a GMP product. And they did that in Portugal. They did that through Canadian converters, and they are now doing it through some other markets. And that got challenged in the last 12 months. So this supply chain, and especially the GMP conversion, is a bit disrupted. We saw product being stalled in Portugal. We saw Canadian converters being challenged by German regulators. So we as Canify are trying to fix that. And that's actually also the reason we did announce our merger to MG Health. MG Health is a South African-based cannabis company, actually the first one who got GMP certified in South Africa. So by merging, we actually now combine two GMP certified entities in one company, one based in South Africa and the other one based in Germany, which we're operating in already. You see our supply network, which is actually spanning over the whole world. So we also import from Canada, but we do import also from Latin America, from South Africa, and that's how we got friends with MG Health. We do import from Greece, from Spain, from Portugal, from Denmark, from North Macedonia, so we basically import from all over the world. All these supply chains had become challenged, and we believe that that merger is a very good answer to that challenge because, as said, both of our entities are fully GMP certified, and we are able to import into those entities and GMP release product into the German and also into the European markets. So these entities I described, starting with our German-based entity. It's based in Leipheim, which is in Bavaria. It's important to mention that, and my colleagues from German companies will support me in regulations in Germany are very heterogeneous, so it depends very much where you are based, what your regulations are, and Bavaria has some advantages and some disadvantages. Bavaria looks at cannabis as a so-called API, as a raw material, which makes it easier for me to import in terms of regulations, but when it comes to specifications, so the microbiological cleanliness is one of the harshest. So on one hand, I have a difficult job compared to some others. On the other hand, I'm very flexible in importing products through my Bavarian-based site. Right now, we are turning through that site about 2 to 2.5 tons a month, and that means that that site is at full capacity. And that's why we're adding now a second site, which is based in South Africa, which today first has a production capacity of 4.5 tons, which is product we already import, and we will expand that cultivation footprint into the future. But at the same time, they also have processing capacity of 24 tons. So by merging, I basically unlock another potential volume I can import into the German or other European markets. As said, it's together with one other, the only two GMP certified sites in South Africa, and it's on top TGA certified, so means also certified to supply into the Australian territory. You may imagine that South Africa has slightly lower wages than Germany. So yes, it's a low-cost country, and that makes my whole operation quite more efficient. It sounds counterintuitive that we in the future will ship product from Canada. It actually lands in Frankfurt, and then we ship it to Johannesburg to then ship it back to us in Frankfurt. But if you calculate the cost of it, it does make sense. Plus, there's some other advantages in South Africa. Part of MG Health is also a fully GMP certified lab. So we not only can cultivate, process, but also test our products down in South Africa. And we're actually discussing with our regulator why we would have to retest the product in Germany. Normally, if you're not tested it in Europe, you need to retest it, which has a certain risk. But as this lab is GMP certified by a European authority, there's actually no reason to repeat that on German ground. Let's see how that comes out, as authorities in Germany tend to be a bit more defensive than we would like. Yeah, maybe, let's say for us as a company, I'm talking a lot about Germany. MG Health is already supplying actively into Poland, into Brazil, into Australia, into the UK. So we will basically piggyback on those supply chains with our commercial model we have successfully established in Germany to replicate, let's say, this type of structure into further markets. As said, there is a lab belonging to MG Health called Lucan, which is based in in South Africa and can do the typical microbiological testing. It can do pesticides, and it also can do stability programs, and we have some very successful stability programs in South Africa. So in a nutshell, and that's actually my final slide, what we try to be is to go from seed to patient on a cultivation supply basis. So we do cultivate in South Africa. We do receive supply from all over the world. We do release it. We ship it to pharmacies. And we run our own teleclinic called Canify Health. So we also address the doctor-patient conversation. In terms of business units, I talked about us supplying our own brand. We do use our GMP footprint also to service third parties. So we also ship product GMP released to customers in Germany right now. And we service 2 of the top 5 distributors on the German ground. We run our own teleclinic. We run our own brand. And we also look into the future. So we look also at innovation, which is why we closed 2 joint ventures. One is about an innovative medical device. It will be an inhalation device. So you basically know it from asthma and or COPD. We are developing it with standardized extracts and are running it through the EMA approval procedure. So we will have a certified medical device, CE marked by EMA for inhalation therapy of cannabis. You may imagine that if you inhale cannabis into your deep lung tissues, it's very effective, it's very bioavailable, and it's very fast. So by that, we actually offer to the physicians something they find more familiar than a flower with the same onset of action a flower consumption inhalation would actually have. And our second joint venture I touched upon called Kataros. So also to make trade more easy, we joint ventured with the biggest association of pharmacies in Germany, and will allow 7,500 pharmacies to participate in the cannabis business, and basically localize the purchase of cannabis back to the pharmacy at the corner, because it can actually be shipped all over Germany and be covered also on the small installments. So that's how we position ourselves as a one-stop shop, as said, towards distributing the market and serving the market with our services, and also receiving and releasing supply into the German market, and in the future also beyond that. So I was faster than I thought, so I give more time to Francesco. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sascha.